Welcome to Brazos Matters. I'm Jay Sokol. I first set foot on the Texas A&M campus in 1987 as a wide-eyed freshman from a very small town. The enrollment was about 36,000, which was 7 times the size of my town. And to get around campus, you either walked, you rode a bike, maybe there was a skateboard or two floating around, or you caught a shuttle bus. Motorized scooters had just become a thing, and it was probably the heyday for those until they kind of went extinct here for about 25 years. That's how it felt to me. But you flash forward to today, and KAMU is located atop the very modern and impressive Innovative Learning Classroom building, the ILCB, and that holds thousands of students at one time. And when a class time ends, I mean, look out, because it's a swarm of e-scooters and e-bikes and e-skateboards and whatever those one-wheeled things are called. You better keep your eyes up and your head on a swivel to make sure you stay safe. So that's a pretty fair lead into today's topic of micromobility on the Texas A&M campus. My guests are Dr. Jennifer Griffith, the instructional professor in the Department of Health Policy and Management within A&M School of Public Health, and Byron Prestridge, manager of Texas A&M Transportation Services, Sustainable Transportation Department. Thank you both for being here. It's really a pleasure to have you both in the studio.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Jay.
You bet. So Jennifer, as I understand it, you recently had a group of seniors who took on a capstone project in an attempt to identify any micromobility problems and to ultimately propose solutions to you, Byron. So let's start with this. What exactly is the problem on this campus related to micromobility?
Well, that's kind of a layered question.
All right.
So if we think about micromobility, it isn't just the e-bikes and the e-scooters. It's actually people walking.
Okay.
It's people riding manual bikes.
I'm part of the problem.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's just a problem. It's multiple modes of transportation coalescing in the same place at the same time. People are trying to get to the same place in the same time. And no one group is to blame for any of the challenges we're facing. It's a matter of density and people trying to get to the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
So when this opportunity actually arose, Byron and I actually have worked together in the past. And so when it landed on our talking together about this, both of us are cyclists, but we both walk on campus. We both have to get to places on campus. And so it's not necessarily finger pointing or blaming one type of transportation. Rather, it's trying to think about sharing the space together. And so when the students were proposed with this potential project, there was no finger pointing. There was, we have a challenge on campus. We need to get people from point A to point B safely. And people are going to be on different modes of transportation. So how do we help people coexist in that same spot together?
Yeah. Byron?
Yeah, when she contacted me with the issue and proposal that a capstone class address this piece, I couldn't say yes fast enough. Through our previous experience, I've found our capstone programs to be very immersive. And these kids really took the challenges. They took all of the pieces of information that I gave them, elements that we were already incorporating, so that they could incorporate it into their plan as well. And they put out a plan that is very smooth. It's completely doable, and it will have an impact.
So being a liberal arts guy, I would not have guessed that this topic, this issue, this challenge would be tackled by the School of Public Health. I would have thought, some engineering class would have done this. So that being the case, did the difference in perspective maybe lead to a different set of proposed solutions in your mind?
I think one thing that our students often encounter in public health is that they need to work across different disciplines. So in a lot of ways, we bring different disciplines together in order to address problems. And we might be looking at it through a public health lens, but we're going to need other expertise in order to address problems, anything that we encounter in the field. And our students also look at things from a determinants of health perspective. So in this case, we're dealing with environmental, physical, and built environmental determinants, individual behaviors, and even socioeconomic determinants. Why are people choosing the mode of transportation that they're choosing? It could be driven by their economic situation. So a lot of this is really peeling back layers of an onion for our students and kind of looking at the different factors that contribute to what they're seeing that ultimately could could be a health challenge or even an opportunity for health promotion. If we think about active transportation and moving around on campus, are we improving health? We also have the challenge of possibly people being injured at the same time. So we're trying to balance all of those things simultaneously.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And the past 2 years we've seen, I think you hit on it when you first opened, is the exponential growth in this category, this use category, right? I was at school around the same time as you were, and I remember it was analog bikes. We call them analog bikes now. Yeah. But the electric choices that are available now, I remember specifically 2 years ago, every year we go through during winter break and we have a count where we see how many bikes are left on campus. And about 2 years ago, we started noticing, there's one electric device. Then a year ago, there's several electric devices. And it's now at a point where I can't go to a rack area and not find at least one electric device in the rack areas. So it is, we are in a new paradigm, and that's part of the discomfort, is getting used to that new paradigm. I think the days where you can walk out of this building specifically with headphones on and immersed in the middle of a TV show or watching some video, you probably need to rethink that choice, Yeah. And the same can be said for talking on the phone while you're scooting or riding a bike, making smarter choices that accommodate everyone because of the density. There's just so many people on campus. And we're each trying to get somewhere in a very short amount of time. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, that's 6 times a day, and it's for 20 minutes only. So It's very condensed.
I know what I experience as somebody who primarily walks on this campus. You two know what you experience, the way you move around campus, but were there any findings that surprised you, maybe you didn't know, or maybe some data points that popped up that you just found completely fascinating?
I don't know if it was data points that popped up, but I think the perceptions of the students as they worked through these challenges and thinking about how different individuals they know got around campus. We had students in the class who used scooters. We had students who rode analog bikes. We had students who walked. And so they all brought their own personal experiences to the table and talked about their perception and their interaction with each other and others on campus. So I think that it was the realization that they were both part of the challenge and part of the solution was probably, for me as an instructor, most interesting, because they really had to be introspective and reflective, but then they had to engage in critical and creative thinking to really start to kind of peel back that layer to see what was going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was very critical that it didn't come off as a instructional piece for micromobility users only, right? It needed to be a breadth of proposals that addressed transportation across all methods and modes, so that it wasn't, again, that finger point or that feeling of, the newest user, the micromobility user, is the problem, when that's simply not the case. It's just a matter of us all getting used to this new way.
Are there any rules of the road? Are there any protocols at all that are in place and they're just not known about?
Yeah, absolutely. We instituted some new regulations about a year ago that help control what type of electric devices can be here on campus. We're in such a emerging market that there are manufacturers that are playing in gray areas, and they're manufacturing things that don't hit current codes and most major municipality codifications. One of those is the limit of 750 watts or 1 horsepower. That's common across pretty much all 50 states, that's the limit of where micromobility ceases. But we've seen on campus there's multiple examples of electric motorcycles and electric scooters that are well beyond the 750 watt piece. So being able to control some of that is integral. So after these new regulations, we're instituting a new registration policy. All devices will need to be registered, and we're using a nonprofit called Bike Index to help us manage that. And that's not just managing the data coming in, but being able to look at it from an analytical point of view. And I can then, once I have a body of registration, I can then see what trends are. I can see are there more electric stick scooters, or are there more of the electric skateboards. Right now, those are just anecdotal observations on campus.
Now, what you just laid out Are those from recommendations that came from this capstone project?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So when we first met, I gave them the set of new regulations that we had, and they built their proposal based off of that as the existing framework. And then I gave them a teaser that we were going to move to this bike index piece. So that was another way that they were able to layer in pieces that we were already going to use, and then build on those, right?
Okay.
And add pieces to those. But there was one innovative approach that I'd like to address now, and because we are attempting to get this off the ground, and that is we do have some areas on campus called no wheel zones currently, but there's no enforcement associated with it. These kids came up with a really innovative way to potentially control that a little bit better without having an enforcement component, and that is utilizing the core value here at Texas A&M and calling them howdy zones. And these are areas where, whether you're walking or riding a bike, you're taking off your headphones, you're disengaging from your electronic devices, and you're talking to people eye to eye, person to person, and you're saying howdy. I think that's a fantastic way to go about putting some social pressure on these really conflicting areas.
So how would anybody know they're in a howdy zone?
So that's the good question, right? Design intent would be there. They did recommend some things like we use some reflective beacons at some intersections on campus. They recommended using a novel approach of doing some maroon reflective beacons. I think that's a cool approach. But the big piece that I took away from it was they were very innovative in the approach, and it was not a carrot or stick, if you will.
Right. Is there a way to separate some of these mobility methods from foot traffic of old folks like me? I mean, can that be done to sort of move those things off the sidewalk and into designated lanes or what have you?
Yeah, we are trying that, and you will see some design elements come in the future on campus that point to that. One area that we've already done is the green paint at Pickard Pass that gives you clear delineation on where traffic should be, which direction that traffic should be flowing. And if you watch during the weekends, especially during special events, it does work. Now, is everyone paying attention to it? No, but it's getting some penetration.
Have you considered medians? Because they're so popular in our community. Have you just considered putting up a lot of medians on campus? Just a suggestion.
Well, I think we have enough U-turns, but
we do have a lot of U-turns. Let me pause just for a second. If you just tuned in, I'm Jay Sokol. You're listening to Brazos Matters, and our topic today is micro-mobility on the Texas A&M campus. And my guests are Dr. Jennifer Griffith from the Department of Health Policy and Management within A&M School of Public Health, and Byron Prestridge, Manager of Texas A&M Transportation Services, Sustainable Transportation Department. Okay, Jennifer, how does cell phone use fit into all of this?
Well, I think you look around, pretty much we're attached to our cell phones. And for some reasons, we need them. So there are a lot of ways that we access technology and resources on campus that you need your cell phone in order to be able to gain access. But I think that we have situations where maybe we should be putting them away. The students' concept of the howdy zone was really something that they were thinking about. What do we do to leverage what most people are coming to campus for, to be part of a community, to leverage A&M core values, to live in that spirit of Aggieland, and really try to connect with people, not technology-wise, but just a general howdy. Y'all were talking about when you were students. I was a student in the mid-'90s, and there were 45,000 of us, and I could not walk from one place to another without at least getting 2 or 3 howdies.
Absolutely.
That's true.
Absolutely.
And so my students asked about that. They said, did people say howdy when you were a student? Absolutely. I said, come to think of it, you don't get that many now. And in fact, sometimes I did tell my students a story, and Byron heard this. A young person was walking out of a building, headed straight towards me. Headphones or earbuds were in, cell phone was right in front of their face, and they were weaving everywhere. And so I just said, howdy, startled them. They looked up, kind of made eye contact, and I thought, well, there's a little bit of proof that sometimes just saying howdy to somebody can change the trajectory of their path in a good way. So I think, we've got technology that's here to stay. We need to figure out how to maybe disconnect when we need to disconnect and pay attention. I think it's no different than thinking about people in cars. Fiddling with the radio was when I was a student.
Sure.
We didn't have cell phones.
Yeah, you got to stretch for the cassette that fell into the floorboard.
Yes, or you're flipping through the CD book that's in the passenger seat looking for that CD you want to switch to. So those same challenges have existed. They just manifest differently over time. So some of the strategies we used even back in the 90s of just paying attention, heads up, can work here.
But I am so amazed at our student body who are able to ride these scooters or ride the skateboards or e-skateboards or those one-wheeled things while, with the headphones, with the earbuds, and looking down at their screen. It's so much that's going on with the eyes down.
It is a lot. And I like to say that when I was that age, I bounced. Now that I'm the age I am, I break. So those choices change as you get older, right? Because there's consequences. So, that's part of the safety and etiquette campaign that we're launching with MARCOM and Transportation Services Marketing and Communications is this piece that we're all in this together. And speak to those different groups, right? Speak to the pedestrian that's walking across campus. Speak to the driver that is driving across campus, and speak to them in voices that they understand and with terminology that they can relate to.
I think another big piece of this, Jay, when the students first started working on this project, we brought in different folks from across campus because they wanted to better understand the policies, the laws, the regulations that existed, and they came out with there's a knowledge gap. Some of these things we know inherently, like it's probably not a good idea to drive while you're distracted. They got that. But even thinking about when a pedestrian is in the crosswalk, what is permissible, which direction should wheeled traffic flow? It should be flowing with cars. It's not against. And so there's a knowledge gap that a lot of students come to campus, they engage with different types of mobility to get around campus, but they don't always know the rules of the road, so to say. And so part of the other aspect that the students proposed was leveraging existing opportunities such as Howdy Week and MSC Open House to really put Byron and his team in the forefront of here's things that you need to know about getting around on campus. So there's this recognition, there's a knowledge gap, there's policies that exist. You've got to bring those two together.
That would be beautiful because that needs to also carry off campus as well.
Right.
So you've already talked about this in little pieces, but go over it again for me. Based on recommendations that have come out of your capstone class and recommendations and initiatives that you already sort of had in motion a bit, Byron, when I am coming onto the Texas A&M University campus on my Theo e-scooter, what do I encounter ideally in terms of behavior that you would like to see? I make my way from off campus to on campus and I'm moving through campus. What do I see? What do I hear? What's my behavior supposed to be ideally?
Yeah, there's two pieces. The first is you still need to be aware of your entire surroundings. We're very good at it when we're in a vehicle, when we're in a car, to know, to look, to have an awareness of what's going on behind us. But I think people still think of scooters a little bit as toys. So they act like a child on them sometimes, and they weave in and out of things, and understand that there are others around you. And there was one accident just out here in front of the MSC where someone was turning out of the bike lane and didn't realize that there was a faster micromobility device approaching them from behind, and they cut them off, right? So just those basic awareness pieces, and understand that if it's been a while since you've gone 15, 20 miles an hour, that there is a learning curve. So when you step on these devices, just because they're able to perform at that level doesn't mean that you're proficient at that level.
Yeah.
So understanding that you have to take your own safety in mind. And the final piece is just obey the rules of the road, right? You have to stop at stop signs, just like every other wheeled device. You have to be courteous of the pedestrians around you. But I will say a message to pedestrians too, and that is that if you see someone at an intersection and they've stopped, that does not mean that you just keep on walking. Take your turn, right? Mm-hmm. Don't encumber someone as you're looking at your phone walking across an intersection.
But am I on my device in the street? Am I on the sidewalk? Where am I supposed to be?
That's a good question. In situations like Ross Street,
Tell me which one Ross is.
So Ross is the gated street that runs east-west on campus from the engineering corridor all the way to right out here. So that's a really busy street, and we're confined by some obviously buildings, trees, and other elevation changes on Ross Street that prohibit us from making that any wider than it already is. Mm-hmm. So mitigation efforts there are to potentially limit vehicle access on that road to help limit the density, and then to give bikers the room that they need. Sometimes it's going to have to be a painted bike lane. Is that the ideal case? No. Ideally, I would want to move and create separate paths for micromobility users that is further separated from the pedestrian paths, right? Mm-hmm. That they're two different causeways, if you will.
Right.
And some of the design elements that we're proposing to rehab the Houston Street pedestrian and PEV entrance onto campus. Houston used to be a thoroughfare for vehicles. Now it's a pedestrian thoroughfare right there in front of the post office. Mm-hmm. Some design elements there are further separating, giving clear delineation for this is where pedestrians are chosen to go, and this is where wheeled devices choose to go.
And then when I hit a howdy zone in the future, what am I going to hear? What am I going to see? And what am I supposed to do? Tell me that again. I'm
hoping that what you see is some type of visual cue, right? The RRFBs really work. That's the rapid refracting beacons. That's a hard word to say. Maybe that's why they acronym it. But those are very effective at grabbing your attention, no matter what mode of transportation you're using. I like the idea of doing some maroon RRFBs. I think that's a good idea. So imagine walking onto the academic plaza, and right as you get to the bollard area, there's a maroon sign that says this is a howdy zone, branded A&M branded, mm-hmm. with some maroon RRFBs, and perhaps it's student-led groups are out there informing people on what that means. There is going to be some educational component to it first. It's not something that can just generate out of nothing. So there will have to be some marketing behind it, mm-hmm. and some thought process in how it gets laid out.
Jennifer, do you and your students continue helping Byron in this regard, or are you like, look, we've done our thing, Byron, it's up to you now?
That's a great question, Jay. So these students were seniors, and the majority of them walked the stage in May right after they presented to Byron and his team. Okay. Some of my students are going to be here working on graduate degrees. It is possible that they'll have opportunities to be engaged. Definitely, I've stayed engaged because I think this is something that the students kind of put it really well. They said, we live here too. This is our home too, and we need to do our part. And they've stayed engaged even after graduation because they had a commitment to seeing what would happen. Mm. And so I made the commitment to them to always keep them posted as this kind of plays out. But I think it also offers opportunities for the next generation of students, the next group of seniors, even juniors. There's so many opportunities on campus, and our students are an excellent resource. They're creative. They care. They want to do things that leave a lasting mark on this university, just like the generations that came before them. So more opportunities to do this kind of work, I think you'll see lasting impact.
Have either of you been contacted by other universities that have heard about your classroom work and potential implementation?
Not directly to this, but I was just at a conference, International Parking and Mobility Conference, where we presented on some of the more architectural changes that are hopefully coming to campus and related to our mobility master plan, which takes us through 2025. And that's kind of a broad sketch of what are the priorities for transportation services and what's the hierarchy of the mode split. And that hierarchy places pedestrian at the top and bikes and PEVs in the next tier, with personal vehicles on the last tier.
Okay. So we have a couple minutes left. Any parting shots for us related to micromobility?
I just want to commend these group of young professionals. They put together a great package, and one of the key differences that really stood out to me was I've seen a lot of presentations, and I've given a lot of presentations, and you can tell just in the enthusiasm that they had with this that they were 100% devoted to this effort, and they really took it to heart. And I appreciate their efforts.
Yeah.
So thanks for having us.
My pleasure, and thanks for taking a chance. I think one thing I would say is these students walked into the classroom without knowing anything other than this was their capstone class. They didn't know the client. They didn't know the topic until the second week of class. So they had to place a lot of trust in me, but also trust that they could go through this process using the tools and the skills they developed over the course of the curriculum.
Right.
And part of that meant that our client, Byron, would recognize you're working with students. These are young professionals. They're still developing some of that savvy, but the encouragement that they received, you could just see that they got more and more confident as the semester went on. And when it came time to present, I have students every semester, whether it's an honors capstone or our traditional capstone, I do not want to present. I don't want to speak in front of people.
Oh, gosh.
And this team practiced, and those students that were probably most kind of reticent about doing that totally rocked it. So I can't say enough about having this opportunity for students to do something real.
Well, thank you both for what you have done to help us make progress in this regard. I think it's significant, and I think it'll be long-lasting. So, Dr. Jennifer Griffith and Byron Prestridge, thank you so much for being here in studio with us.
Thank you so much, Jay. Really appreciate it.
Brazos Matters is a production of Aggieland's Public Radio, 90.9 KAMU FM, a member of Texas A&M University's Division of Marketing and Communications. Our show is engineered and edited by Matt Dittman. All Brazos Matters episodes are available on the KAMU website, on the NPR app, YouTube, or on your favorite podcast platform. We would love for you to rate and review, so please subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Jay Sokol. Thanks so much for listening to Brazos Matters.